My name is Freya Hayes, and on the day my brother was being honored by the Department of Defense, I wasn't even on the guest list. The sun was sharp over the naval base. I'd flown in under my own clearance in uniform, but without announcement. No aides, no family waiting. I stepped up to the security checkpoint at the main auditorium, handed over my ID, and watched the officer behind the podium frown. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not listed for entry." I didn't flinch. I'd expected it. The list had never included me, not in family albums, not in group emails, not even at my grandfather's funeral. Behind the gate, I could already see them, my parents in matching gray coats, smiling in a sea of polished brass. My brother Lucas, on stage, receiving congratulations, with that easy charm he was born wearing. The security officer leaned in again. "Ma'am, could you repeat your name?" "Rear Admiral Freya Hayes," I said. Slowly, deliberately. He stiffened. "Hayes, pause." His earpiece crackled. One moment. Within seconds, another figure approached, taller, older, wearing the insignia of Fleet Command. His eyes locked on mine, then he saluted sharp and clean. "Ma'am," he said, voice firm. "We've been expecting you." He turned to the security team. "Escort Admiral Hayes through the officer's entrance." Immediately. As I walked past the gates that were meant to keep me invisible, I didn't look back. Because I wasn't here to be seen by them. I was here to be named. I was 13 the first time my mother told someone I was a little difficult. She said it with a smile, the kind people use at brunches when they talk about wildflowers invading their lawn. My brother had just won a leadership award at school. I had just finished building a model rescue ship out of recycled parts from my science teacher's junk pile. It even floated, but she never asked how. By the time I was 15, Lucas was already the family's future, a walking echo of my father's best years in uniform. He had the look, the stride, the natural ease that filled rooms. I had questions, and long silences, and the kind of ambition that made people uncomfortable when it wasn't packaged in charm. I joined the Navy on a scholarship they never talked about. My mother said I was running away. My father said I was wasting my spine on something that would eat me alive. And Lucas? He said nothing at all. Just watched me leave with the same quiet expression he wore at every dinner table when I spoke too much. For years, we barely spoke. I moved base to base, graduated top of my class, earned citations that only strangers seemed proud of. When I received my first command position in the Indo-Pacific, I mailed a formal note to my parents. It came back unopened. The last time I saw them was at my grandfather's funeral, or rather, at the empty church, an hour after the actual service had ended. They'd changed the time. No one told me. Not even Lucas. I stood in a room filled with leftover flowers and silence in full-dress uniform, wondering how you could be erased so cleanly by people who still carried your name. There was no confrontation, no message afterward, just another wall built higher. I stopped sending updates. I stopped asking. But it never really stopped hurting. I read about Lucas's rise through the ranks, the same way strangers follow war heroes, through press releases, public statements, the occasional photo with brass behind a podium. He did well. Better than well. And I didn't resent him for that. I just resented that I'd been made invisible to make room for his light. So when word reached me quietly through a mutual contact at the Pentagon that Lucas was receiving the Cross of Merit at the national ceremony, something in me stirred. Not rage, not envy. Just a steady, unshakable weight in the chest, like something unfinished asking for air. I told no one I was going, not even my commanding officer. I filed personal leave, booked the ticket myself, and packed the uniform I hadn't worn in 6 months. I didn't know what I was walking into. I only knew one thing: I was done staying erased. As I stepped through the gates of the base that morning, everything was polished, clean lines, flags catching the light just right, families clapping before anything even began. I walked alone, no name on the program, no seat reserved. And that was exactly how they designed it. But the thing about silence is, it doesn't erase truth. And mine was about to arrive, whether they wanted it or not. The hallway leading into the auditorium smelled like cold air and brass polish. I paused at the checkpoint, felt the stillness in my own breath. The officer behind the desk didn't know it, but he was standing at the edge of a story my family had spent decades burying. He asked for my name, and this time I gave it without flinching. Without explanation, because I wasn't there to knock on a door. I was there to walk straight through it. Part 2. The name not on the list, 720 words. The security checkpoint wasn't chaos. It was quiet, clinical. The kind of quiet that comes from practiced indifference. The officer scanned my ID again, jaw tight. He was young, probably not even born when I started service. Still, I could see the shift in his posture when the system didn't respond the way it should have. "I'm sorry, Admiral," he said carefully. "Your name doesn't appear on the authorized guest manifest for this event. I can check with command. No need," I replied steady. "If I'm not on the list, that's by design." "I'll wait." He blinked, unsure whether he'd misheard my tone, too calm, too certain. He gestured toward the side wall. I stepped aside, not humiliated, just observed. Through the glass, I could see them arriving in clusters. Wives in pressed navy blue toddlers, with paper flags, lieutenants smoothing out their collars. My family walked in like they'd rehearsed it. My mother's pearls caught the sun. My father's lapel pin gleamed. Lucas led the way, his uniform, immaculate movements precise. A golden sun in every measurable way. No one looked back. I didn't expect them to. A voice crackled in the security officer's headset. His eyebrows twitched. Then he stood straighter. "Excuse me, Admiral," he said. "Commander Rollins would like a word." A tall man approached from the left corridor, graying hair-hardened features, the insignia of Fleet Command high on his shoulder. I knew that face. He was there the night I coordinated a maritime evacuation in Luzon, when the typhoon cut off comms, and we still got every civilian out alive. He didn't smile. He saluted. "Admiral Hayes," he said clearly. "We've been looking for you." His voice was loud enough for the nearby staffers to glance up. I nodded and returned the salute. He gestured. "This way, ma'am. We'll take the officer's entrance." No confusion, no explanation, just recognition. As we walked down the inner corridor, I caught glimpses of the pre-ceremony setup flags, aligned cameras perched on risers, name cards on velvet chairs. One of them said Mr. and Mrs. Hayes. Another said Cole. Lucas Hayes. There was no card for me. Not even an anonymous placeholder. I wondered if my parents had asked about me. If Lucas had. We reached the staging room. The aide there offered me water. I declined. I took off my coat and smoothed my uniform sleeves. The silence of the room was oddly familiar, like every debriefing before a mission no one thought would succeed. Commander Rollins watched me. "Do they know you're here?" I met his gaze. "They will." He gave a short nod, not of sympathy, but of understanding. About damn time. A few minutes later, I stepped onto the side balcony of the auditorium. From there, I had a clear view of the seating area, the central podium, the massive projection screens playing highlights of Lucas's career deployments. Speeches, smiles. My mother laughed at something a general said. My father leaned back proud and composed. I knew that body language. It was the same pose he used at Lucas's high school graduation when he told me to take the picture, not be in it. The master of ceremonies adjusted the mic. The audience began to settle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began today, "we gather to honor service legacy and leadership." I closed my eyes just briefly. My hands didn't tremble. My boots stayed rooted. There was no part of me still asking for permission. A staffer appeared beside me. "Admiral Hayes, you'll be introduced shortly. Would you prefer to walk from stage left or center aisle?" I turned toward the aisle, the very path my family had used minutes ago. "Center," I said. "I'll go where they can see me coming." The staffer hesitated, then nodded and disappeared. As the MC continued his introduction of the Hayes family, I stood behind the door, waiting. Not for the moment, but for the silence. Because that was what would break first. And once it did, there would be no turning it back. Part 3. The name spoken aloud. The announcer's voice was smooth practiced, heavy with reverence. Colonel Lucas Hayes has distinguished himself through service resilience and diplomacy. Today we honor not only his accomplishments, but the values he represents: courage, discipline, and family legacy. The words struck like a muted drumbeat. Predictable, polished, a performance of public pride. I stood just beyond the double doors that led into the main auditorium posture, straight breath-controlled. I could hear the shift of bodies, the hush that fell over the room as Lucas took the stage. Cameras clicked. Applause rose. My family's applause. I didn't move. Not until I heard the pause. A long one. Longer than any natural transition. Before we continue, the MC said, his voice-dipping fleet command has asked that we acknowledge another officer in attendance today, a figure whose contributions, while quieter, have shaped missions across 3 continents. My fingers curled slightly against my thigh. She is not listed in today's program, but not because she was overlooked. She was omitted. The room stilled. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rear Admiral Freya Hayes. The name dropped like a flare into still water. It didn't explode, it illuminated. I opened the door and stepped into the aisle. All eyes turned. There was a ripple, subtle but unmistakable. A delay in comprehension. Then a recognition that moved through the rows like a breath held too long. My mother's head whipped around. Her hand dropped from her pearl necklace. My father's mouth parted slightly, eyes narrowing in disbelief. Lucas, still standing at the podium, tensed, then stepped back. He knew. He had known. I walked down the center aisle, slowly, each step measured, each glance a record of someone remembering that I existed. A few officers stood, then a few more. Some saluted. Others simply bowed their heads. I didn't look left or right. I didn't break pace. When I reached the base of the stage, the MC stepped aside. Lucas was still there. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, almost reluctantly, he took one step forward and extended a hand. "Welcome," he said, eyes locked on mine. "Welcome, Admiral Hayes." He said it clearly, no smile, no overperformance, just truth. A flicker passed across the audience, shock, correction, re-evaluation. The sister they thought was estranged, the officer they never claimed, the name they'd never said out loud. Until now. I took his hand, briefly, firmly, then turned to face the room. The applause started slowly, then grew, not wild, not exuberant, but respectful, weighty. Behind me, the giant projection screen shifted new footage, a montage of my deployments, storm extractions, high sea evacuations, blurred headlines of operations never publicly claimed. My face in uniform, my team, my record. It was the truth finally unhidden. The MC returned to the mic. In recognition of her service record, Rear Admiral Hayes is hereby awarded the Naval Cross for humanitarian operations, for leadership under fire, for service without recognition, and for the kind of quiet valor that sustains a fleet. He handed me the medal. I didn't blink. I didn't smile. But I felt it like an old wound finding air for the first time. When the formalities ended, I stepped aside. Lucas leaned in as I passed him. "You came," he whispered. I didn't respond. Not yet. The reception began in the courtyard, champagne flutes, small talk, camera flashes. I remained at the periphery where I preferred to be. Eventually, Lucas approached, no entourage, no agenda, just the brother I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "I didn't know they left you off the list," he said quietly. "Didn't you?" I asked. He looked down. "I didn't add you either." There it was. Not an apology, but something real. "I didn't come for them," I said. He nodded. "I know." I watched our parents from across the courtyard. My mother looked like she wanted to melt into her seat. My father stared out toward the naval flag as if it would give him permission to feel something. "They won't say it," Lucas murmured. "Not today, probably not ever." "I'm not here for what they say," I replied. "I'm here for what they can't take back." He glanced sideways. "That's new." "No," I said, stepping away. "That's earned." And I left him standing there in the sunlight, in the legacy he inherited, while I walked back into the shadow I'd rebuilt with my own hands. But this time, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. Part 4. They tried to erase me. I chose not to erase them. The reception spilled into the lower garden, where retired officers in creased suits mingled with fresh recruits, trying to look comfortable in their first medals. Laughter floated through the air, delicate and performative. Every conversation was tinged with caution, the kind reserved for rooms where someone has just said what wasn't meant to be said. I stood alone under a fig tree at the far edge of the courtyard, sipping water from a plain glass. I didn't need champagne. I already had clarity. My mother found me first. She moved like someone trying not to be noticed, chin-lifted pace steady, but shoulders tighter than I remembered. The last time she'd looked at me like this, I was 19, sitting at the breakfast table, after telling her I'd accepted the Navy commission. Back then, she'd blinked twice, set her coffee down, and said, "I hope you don't expect a parade." Now she came to a halt in front of me, eyes glancing toward the others nearby, checking if anyone was listening. "You could have told us you were coming," she said. "Not a greeting, a correction." "I wasn't invited," I replied. She bristled. "That's not the point." "No," I said quietly. "It's exactly the point." She crossed her arms. "Freya, this was Lucas's day. You chose a dramatic time to make a statement." I turned fully to her, letting the silence stretch until she had to feel it. "I didn't come to make a statement," I said. "I came to stand in a place I earned. If that disturbs the narrative, maybe the narrative needed disturbing." She blinked. "You always think you're the wounded one." "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending I wasn't." Her mouth parted slightly, searching for footing, but none came. And before she could try again, my father joined her. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me as though seeing a stranger in a familiar coat. "You've changed," he said. "No," I answered. "You just stopped recognizing me." His jaw tensed. "We didn't know you chose not to know." The space between us was dense with all the things they'd said about me when I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to recite them. I didn't come to drag them across the past. I came to claim the present. "I'm not here to ruin your celebration," I added. "I'm here because no one ruins me anymore." For the first time, my father looked uncertain. My mother looked small. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "I don't hate you," I said, not because they deserved it, but because I meant it. "But I won't shrink just to make you comfortable." Neither replied. That in itself was an answer. I turned to leave, but my brother was already standing a few feet behind them. Lucas didn't say anything, just held my gaze. I waited. Finally, he stepped forward and nodded toward the exit. "Walk with me." We crossed the edge of the courtyard in silence, the path crunching beneath our boots. "She asked me to leave you off the list," he said quietly. I didn't ask who she was. I didn't need to. She said it would cause confusion, that it would make people ask questions. "And you?" I asked. I let her. That silence wasn't empty, it was heavy. "I'm not proud of it," he said. I looked ahead. "Neither am I." We stopped at the base of a flagpole. The sun had started to shift gold, softening the sharpness of noon. "I didn't come for them," I said again. "And I didn't come to be forgiven or thanked. I came because I'm done hiding from the story they kept trying to rewrite." Lucas exhaled. "You could have stayed invisible." I turned to him. "I could have, but then you'd be standing here alone." He looked at me, really looked. Like maybe for the first time in years, he saw me not as an absence, but as someone complete. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I'm glad I came for myself," I replied. Then I walked away. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need to prove anything else. I had already arrived. Part 5. The family I built without permission. 2 days later, I was back at base. The fog along the docks hadn't lifted yet, but the recruits were already lined up on the sand, calling cadence through the mist. Their voices were raw, some still learning when to lead, when to listen. From the observation deck, I watched them move. Not perfect, not in sync, but trying. Behind me, the command room was still humming. A young lieutenant jogged past, saluted, then whispered, "Ma'am, the team said your brother was on the news last night. He mentioned you." I nodded, but didn't ask what he said. I didn't need his words to verify my presence anymore. Later that afternoon, I stood in front of my unit, a mix of seasoned officers and first-year cadets. We were preparing for a joint deployment simulation. Before we began, one of the youngest, a quiet girl with calloused hands, raised her voice unexpectedly. "Ma'am, when you walked into that auditorium, how did you stay calm?" I let the question hang. Then I said, "Because no one in that room had the power to make me disappear. Not unless I handed it to them." A few heads lowered. One or two smiled. We began the briefing. On the table was a map of the Pacific covered in notes and highlighted routes. I pointed to one red line, an old extraction path I'd used during an operation no one ever gave us medals for. "You don't wait for permission to act with purpose," I said. "And you don't wait for applause to be real." That evening, I stayed late in the war room. On my desk was a photo someone had left anonymously, me at 10 years old, holding my first model ship, face full of fire. On the back, in new handwriting, were 6 words: "Thanks for walking back into frame." No signature. I didn't need one. Conclusion: the ceremony faded into headlines, then silence. My name appeared in a few press releases tucked between accolades for my brother. Most wouldn't notice, but I did. Weeks later, a letter arrived, handwritten, crisp, deliberate. Not from my parents. From Lucas. Inside was a photo of his daughter in a junior cadet uniform, clumsy salute and all. Beneath it, just one line. "If she earns it, I want her to know who her aunt is." I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the other things. I keep my grandfather's compass, my first field journal, and the mission badge I wore in Beirut. I didn't reply. Not in writing. Instead, I mailed his daughter a package. Inside was a copy of my old training manual, a compass, and a note that read, "You don't have to shine like them. Just learn how to find your way." Some families name you once and forget the rest. Others try to bury your name under theirs. But I stood in full uniform before every version of silence they'd ever handed me, and I answered with presence. They left me off the list. He said my name anyway, and that in the end was enough. Not because it changed them, but because it reminded me I had never truly vanished. I had only been waiting for the moment they couldn't ignore the echo.